Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. Rachel Robinson is the Executive Vice President of Public Sector Services at Teleperformance based in Bristol in the UK. Teleperformance is almost certainly the largest CX specialist in the world today, with a team of over 300,000 people serving customers in 170 markets using 265 different languages or dialects. Rachel's specialist area is public sector, and her team recently published an opinion paper titled "The Future for Government Contact Centre Services." She asked me to come and speak at the recent launch of the paper in London, so I took the opportunity to ask Rachel, how do government services differ from the companies that we're normally used to dealing with? How is citizen service different to customer service? Okay, let's go straight to the interview. Thanks for being on the CX Files podcast, Rachel. First, I wanted to ask you, why do governments and public sector bodies actually need to worry about CX at all? In most cases, the citizen's got no choice where they're going for that type of service. For example, I can't go to an alternative provider if I don't like the way my passport's being processed. So what's the incentive for them to actually worry about providing a great customer experience?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So I think that government should try to give great customer experience, because doing the opposite or giving poor customer experience is just going to lead to multiple contacts rather than to first contact resolution. And it's also going to lead to customer complaints, and both of these will increase the overall cost for government. So poor customer experience can also lead to negative publicity, and in extreme cases, it can lead to headline news. Another thing to think about is just that all commercial services, and therefore also all government departments, have strict service levels to adhere to. And with government, these are service levels that are reported and measured out to the public. So many of these now focus on the softer service levels like customer experience, rather than just the old service levels, which were like time to answer and abandoned contacts. So this means that the performance of government in achieving good customer service is also becoming a really critical measure for service delivery.
Okay, so it's not just about doing it because it's just the right thing to be doing. There's also an efficiency argument as well.
Absolutely there is, yes, because otherwise they're going to just attract repeat callers and it will drive up the cost.
Okay. Well, I know that you published an opinion paper recently on this subject. It was focused on the future for government contact centres, and this was an update on a paper that you did 2 years ago. In that time, because it doesn't feel like that long, but what's been the biggest change in those 2 years?
So 2 years ago, we really struggled to find good case studies for government contact centres that were relating to digital and self-service initiatives. This time round, it was completely different, and we found some fantastic examples and case studies. So I think that really shows that government, public sector bodies have actually really embraced new digital technology, and they're using multiple initiatives now to get great customer experience. In the opinion paper, an example of that was HM Revenue and Customs. So they've deployed over 11,500 robots across nearly 60 processes, and that's a real major step change, and I think it took them years to deliver it.
That's interesting, because RPA, robotic process automation, is one of the buzzwords in a lot of companies that are planning CX at the moment. Does it really have a role to play in government? Are you seeing real examples of people in government and public sector using these emerging technologies?
So most government contact centres, RPA automation can be used to remove the simple and repetitive questions that are received. That's both in the contact centre and the back office. It's critical, however, for government to track the customer journey before they embark on adding in automation. That's to make sure that automation will actually assist the customer and isn't just going to aggravate or attempt to push them elsewhere to find their answer. We certainly see attempts of exploring automation and other emerging technologies with most of our government customers. And some government departments are quick to make decisions to run pilots on emerging technologies, and others are much more hesitant and much more risk averse. But they're definitely all pretty much talking about it. I think it's definitely more difficult for government to push forward with emerging technologies than in the commercial world. That's because they just don't have the skills in-house to deliver such projects, but also that they need to make decisions using involvement from the security areas of their government departments and technology areas, as well as going to executive teams. And all of that can obviously be quite time-consuming. We've got a fantastic example of where this sort of thing has worked with Her Majesty's Passport Office, where they've just launched contextual voice, or natural voice as it's always called. And what they're doing is they're allowing callers to speak up front to rapidly identify what they need help with. And they're expressing that in their own words rather than having to use government language to do so. What this has allowed us to do is to remove the customer effort in terms of trying to navigate a detailed series of IVR push buttons or those sort of layers up front at the beginning of a call, which most people also really dislike. And the result that we've found so far using this contextual voice is it steered them completely away to the right place, and sometimes to an advisor, other times to an automated service, but it's obviously a lot quicker for the customer. We're also using push messaging prior to a citizen being put through to an agent. And push messaging technology can actually send the answer directly to somebody's smartphone. So again, on Passport as an example of that, where somebody's coming through and they're saying, I need to know how much that I'm going to pay for my passport. That's a bulk standard and simple question. And push messaging can just send them the file and they can get that straight to their smartphone. And that's obviously going to save money for Passport because then the call doesn't go through to an agent, but it's time consuming. It's time saving rather, again, for that particular caller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's interesting because you mentioned about the voice control there. I mean, are the channels that the citizens are using changing dramatically? I saw the NHS has partnered up with Amazon to provide health information on the ecosystem. So are citizens really just asking Alexa for help when they've got questions about government services?
Yeah, absolutely. So the recent partnership between the NHS and Amazon makes sure that when a citizen says things like, Alexa, how do I treat a migraine? That the answer is reliable medical information rather than substandard information. And obviously without input from the NHS, it would end up being unreliable information. Voice assistants like Alexa smart speaker system do probably seem a little bit of a step too far to some government departments. However, I think it's really important that they do embrace it because otherwise the information will just be out there and they won't have any input into it. For me, it's a similar situation to where we were sort of over 5 years ago with social media. So at that point, citizens were left to debate some really important government topics between themselves using social media, and there was no input or interaction from government. Luckily today, that's no longer the case, and social media is actually being used fully and embraced by most government departments.
Are we seeing a change in the expectations of the citizen then? I mean, they see service interactions with industries like retail, for example, and, so then you see the way Amazon treats you, and does that then become an expectation of the government?
Yeah, I think that citizens expect to be able to interact in multiple ways with government and they expect to be able to use digital technologies. And when they can't, I think they get really frustrated. However, I also think that often the citizen expectation is actually really quite low prior to making contact with government. So don't forget that the citizen's not usually choosing to make contact, but they're doing so out of necessity. So such as when they're completing a tax return, they're applying for a passport, or during a time of extreme stress like a flood situation or the closure of an airline which has impacted their holiday. We see proof of this sort of low expectation from citizens from the reaction that we get when they come through to our government contact centre services. So having made contact and then getting a fantastic customer experience with their queries sort of quickly answered in full and first time, they're really, really quick to go on and record the delight in getting that fantastic service in our after-call surveys. And these surveys constantly show sort of 10 out of 10 for the service that they've received.
Yeah, hopefully it's easier to impress them if they've got really low expectations.
That's right, absolutely.
I mean, looking forward then, because we're almost at the end of the year now, what trends or changes are you seeing in public sector and government services? I mean, what can we expect in the year ahead?
So I think the government contact centres will continue to evolve. I think they're turning more into engagement centres. So we're fixing complex citizen issues rather than handling all that simple stuff that we used to do over and over again. I think that this is happening already, and in our centres we have longer, more in-depth training programs for our agents and definitely a higher, more detailed level of expertise than we've ever had before. Citizens, I think, are going to continue to interact with government using social channels like Instagram and smart speakers like Amazon Echo. And I do think, actually, that government's going to realise that these technologies are here to stay, and it's much better for them to be embracing them than to be ignoring them. So I think it's an incredibly exciting future, actually, to be part of. And for contact centre providers like Teleperformance is going to be a far more interesting place to be, actually. So the level of expertise that's needed by us is just going to be higher and higher, go higher and higher. And I think we're going to be working closer than ever before with our government customers.
That's great. Thanks very much, Rachel. And for anyone who wants to get hold of the report, should they just go to your LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all on there. They should go to the LinkedIn and we'll pop them over a copy of the paper.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm @Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.